Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Unlocking your full potential. The journey to long distance running success. Welcome to the Run for PRs podcast, where we do a deep dive into the world of running, training, and unlocking your full potential. I'm Victoria, and today we're talking about the journey to long distance running success. Whether you're training for your first marathon or aiming for a new PR, this episode is all about what it takes to go the distance physically, mentally, and strategically. So let's get into it. The mindset of a long distance runner. Long distance running is not just about running the miles and following the training plan. A lot of it boils down to your mindset. Success comes when you shift from just running to training with a purpose. There's a lot of key mindset shifts that you may need to make in order to become successful in long distance running. We live in a society that really values instant gratification, right? We have Amazon that can deliver things same day. We can go on our phone. We can order Uber Eats. We can literally get things at the snap of our fingers nowadays. And I am worried that a lot of people think the fitness industry is the same way, that you can just sign up and see these instant results. But in running, patience is everything. Progress is not going to happen overnight, and it may take a lot longer than you think. A couple of months ago or years ago, I did a post where I showed my own personal running transformation. My first marathon was in 2013, and I ran a 4:09, about a 9-minute per mile pace. Then about a decade later, in November of 2022, so it's almost 10 full years in between of marathoning, training, 2,000 to 3,000 miles every single year, I ran a 2:54. And a lot of people were like, ooh, 10 years? That took you 10 years? Yes, patience and consistency over time pay off. And sometimes that might mean 10 years of dedicated training. It really depends on what your long-term goals are. But if you have really high goals, they're not necessarily going to happen overnight and at the snap of your fingers. If you have a background in athletics, maybe they might come a little bit quicker to you, but you do have to be patient in this sport and in a lot of these aerobic endurance sports.
Yeah, I really like this topic of patience because, my background was a little bit different where I really liked running as a kid. I liked doing fast, short distance races like a mile or below. And so when I got into discovering what cross country was, I really had to practice patience when we go out on these 3-4 mile long runs or runs at the time. They were long for me back then. But really, what I had to do was just be patient and endure it. And so, you know, we not only talk about patience in terms of like getting the results, right? It could take months, years, whatever, but also just patience throughout each individual run and just like going out there and doing the hard thing. Because sometimes we can justify so many reasons why we shouldn't run, right? And I know we're going to talk about like how do we break through and get to that next level, but the consistency piece is super important, and that goes hand in hand with patience. Um, even with like building up to being able to handle a certain, maybe duration or distance requires a lot of patience.
Absolutely. And I think that's another thing people have a misconception about, because a lot of distance runners won't outright come out and say running is boring. A lot of times training is boring. If you're running high mileage, you're getting out there every day, maybe one rest day a week. Most of the times it is not going to sound super appealing to go out on your run. A lot of runners who are chasing goals that are not professional athletes, it's not what we do for a living. And so we're making running work with the rest of our lives. And it can be really challenging to have to check that off the to-do list every single day. But if your goals are really important to you and you have to follow a strategic training plan to reach your goals, you know that by checking that off, it's a step towards that long-term goal. And oftentimes in that process of every day, 6 days a week, getting up and not being a part of your routine, it's not always enjoyable. It's not always fun. And I worry that sometimes people spend a lot of time on social media. There's a lot of running influencers out there now, and they can really glamorize the sport. They can make things seem really fun. Or if we log on to Strava, it can be a lot of information. You see people constantly going out there and hammering out these runs every single morning, and you might think to yourself, why does it seem so easy for them to do it? But you don't really know what the mental mind game was of them even getting out the door. You have no idea what they are struggling with, what sort of mental shifts they've had to make within their own training. And I think there's just a lot of things that are left out when we get to see what other people are doing, but we don't really experience what's going on inside their mind. So we might think, oh, there's something wrong with me. Running isn't that fun. But no, I'm here to tell you, as someone that has ran, I think it was like 12 years in a row, I hit 2,000 miles every single year. It is boring. It is a grind, and a lot of it is you have to come up with shifts of your mindset to be able to just be consistent getting out the door. I mean, honestly, going out and running for 1 hour, 6-7 days a week, 1 hour or longer, for years on end, you gotta come up with something that gets you out the door, that keeps you motivated, and you have to find joy in the process there. So some of those mind shifts could be embracing the discomfort, right? Running long distances means you're going to be pushing through fatigue. You do need to know when to listen to your body versus, okay, am I just bored here? Or is it just not as fun as it once was? Because if you do want to reach a high level, you are going to have to push through some of those, this is boring, this is monotonous sort of thoughts. Some things that help me are listening to audiobooks, using that time to engage in podcasts. Maybe that's what some of you guys are doing right now when you're on your run, listening to our podcast. But if you can try to kill two birds with one stone on your run, that can really set you up for success. Another thing that I found that was really helpful in my last training cycles were having a partner to run with. So you're getting that socialization hour, plus you're getting your miles in. So if you can make some of these shifts, they can help benefit you in the long run if you have really big goals as a runner. Because the number one thing that's going to help you reach those really big goals that you have is being consistent. And how can we help you become consistent over time?
Yeah, I think as a distance runner, we have to exercise this this mindset on a daily basis sometimes, because like you said, sometimes we're not motivated to run, or we want to quit early, right? So it's really important that we are doing this for the right reason and we find joy. I think when we started running, it was for a reason. We must have liked the way we felt afterwards, or we'd like the challenge, right? And so finding little ways to challenge yourself along the way. I liked how you talked about the things that you do to motivate you to get yourself out the door. And it's nice to hear that, because we see these people online and we just look at their training, and sometimes I think we think that it's so habitual for them that it becomes automatic and it's easy for them, but you still have those days where it is very, very difficult. And so, you just have to ask yourself, are you gonna give up, or are you gonna do the thing? And breaking it down and looking at one run at a time, instead of I need to do all this weekly mileage and all that can be overwhelming. So it's better to just break it down into one run, focus on that, take things in as bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, and some of those people that post about their runs or post on Strava, that actually helps them stay motivated. So if that's something that you can use in your toolbox to help you stay motivated, might as well try it, right? A lot of those influencers getting their camera out and filming them getting ready to go on a run and getting through a run can actually really motivate them, because it's content. And so it's helping them, oh wow, I'm going to get a bunch of content from this run, and it helps them get a little bit more excited for the run. So I'm not trying to hate on anyone's motivational reasons or any content that's out there, but I do think it's important to realize some of these things can actually be tools to help you. And so maybe that's Strava. Maybe when you're on your run, you're thinking about what are you going to title your run, or how are you going to share this run? And having that outside accountability and motivation can be really helpful. I like to have my training in Training Peaks, and I like to see it go green. So any of our athletes listening, I'm sure they know what that feels like when you finish the run that is planned and then the run goes green. That's a little motivation for me of I have all green in my Training Peaks this week. So following along on a plan can be really helpful as well. Next, it's all about building a strong foundation. So if you want to be a strong runner and hit really high goals, you have to have a strong foundation. This means building endurance, strength, and your resilience over time. There's some key pillars to training, and the number one foundation right there is going to be your base mileage. So when we all start running, we have 0 miles that we run per week. But as we get more into the sport, maybe we start with 5 miles per week, and then 10, 15, 20, and over time we gradually build. When we are able to be consistent with our mileage over time and gradually increase week over week, month over month, year over year, that can help us become a stronger runner. So again, it's that consistency piece that can be really key. It helps to build your aerobic engine, and that's what really sets people apart who break through to that next level. The more you can run to a certain point, you are going to get stronger and faster at running.
Yeah, I really like that. So base mileage is the first sort of pillar. The second one that we want to talk about is long runs. So when I think of long runs, it's really any run that's the furthest run you've done in the last few weeks, right? And so it could be like 30 minutes, it could be an hour. When I first started exploring, longer runs, I would say it was probably over an hour in college. And so we would do long runs pretty much every weekend. And early in the season, I would kind of dread showing up to these because I wasn't that fit yet. And so it took a few months in order to feel pretty confident going into them. But we would run anywhere from 9 to 14 miles on a given weekend. And, the thing that I didn't like about it was we'd venture out into the middle of nowhere because it was kind of a small rural area. And the routes would become a lot more challenging and hilly. So we had this one run called the Dip, and it was a good 10.5, 12-mile run, depending on which route you took. But you always felt so good afterwards because you just knew you did something hard, right? And so that goes back to why we want to challenge ourselves and supporting the mental toughness that goes into, identifying as a distance runner. I think long runs can really give you that sort of that, not just the physical benefits, but that mental toughness edge as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really good place where someone can challenge themselves. So even when I first started running, a lot of the long runs I was doing at first were 3-mile runs. The other runs were, 1 or 2 miles. And that long run was the area where I was really pushing myself. And as you start running, as you're getting into things, building your base, that long run is a place where you can experiment with how can I push myself to keep going when my brain is telling me to quit. Because oftentimes on that long run, it's not that your legs are going to give out necessarily. It's more just you have to sit with that uncomfortable, this is so boring for longer than you're used to. So if you're used to going out every day and running for 20 or 30 minutes, when you have to go out on that long run, that's, let's say 45 to 60 minutes, that's a lot longer than what you're used to. And so there's a lot of mental things that come up on those long runs. So if you're someone that struggles with long runs, a lot of this could be related to your mind work that you need to be doing and working on how can I change my thought processes when I get some of these negative thoughts that creep up that say, oh, this is so boring, you should quit, what's the point? We need to combat those and try to, we don't necessarily have to be that toxic positivity where everything's great, sunshine and rainbows, but on a long run, if you have a thought that pops up that's like, wow, I feel terrible, this is so boring, why am I doing this? Why did I sign up for this marathon? You could recognize it and be like, yeah, this is a hard run. Not all of my long runs feel like this. Or you could say, this is a hard run, and this is going to help it so that on race day, I feel stronger. Because the more times you go through that discomfort and you sit in it, the easier it's going to be in the future to sit through that discomfort. And so you're training your mind. Obviously, you're training your body, of course, but you're training your mind as well. And so you can't give up when things get hard on those long runs, and you can't give into those thoughts, because if you do, the same thing is going to happen on race day. So I think the long run is a great way to practice your mental toughness. Next is working on speed and strength. It's really important to step outside of your comfort zone and work on hills, tempos, strides, working on improving your VO2 max, and getting really uncomfortable 2 days per week. You want to get outside your comfort zone and really push things. This is also where a lot of these uncomfortable thoughts will pop up. Thinking, oh, why is this so hard? This pace shouldn't feel this hard. There's a lot of negative thoughts that can creep up during these workouts. And I find a lot of athletes will avoid doing workouts like these because the negative thoughts that creep up become overwhelming and they throw in the towel and they say, I'm just going to do a different workout that's more comfortable for me. And that is when people get stuck inside their comfort zone.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And I was kind of the opposite, where I kind of dreaded the easy days and the longer days. I looked forward to workout days. And I know some people might be able to relate to that. But if you're in that other camp that you talked about, where you kind of dread workout days, like you could run easy every day and be fine. This is where I think you really need to, focus your efforts on. And they don't need to be like max effort. So maybe you could start with what is sort of your strength. Do you prefer hills? Do you prefer tempos? Do you prefer speed intervals? And then once you are, pretty good about consistently doing these workouts and hitting the paces that you want, then you can start to build on that, right? You can add more reps, higher volume, that sort of thing. But it definitely is important to have that 20% of our training be tougher, right? So we talk about a polarized training approach. It's 80% of your mileage is easy, 20% is hard. So this is where the hard work comes into play. So depending on what your goals are, if it's to get fast for 5K or shorter distances, you really want to emphasize more speed and power. So hills, fartleks, speed intervals, and repetition, repeats. Those would be very important. If you're trying to get faster at the half or the full distance, then that stuff I just mentioned would be better for like an off season. You would want to focus more on your threshold, your marathon, your half marathon pace work.
Yeah, a lot of really good points. And if you find that every time you're doing a workout, you're getting a lot of negative thoughts or you're unable to finish the workout, that could be potentially a sign that you're going a little bit too fast on the intervals. And so I like to listen to those thoughts a little bit when I am out on a workout day. If I'm having thoughts that are like, you're not able to sustain this pace, and that's proving to be true within the workout, like you're feeling really gassed during the recovery, like you have to stop and walk, or while you're running, your brain is saying, hey, you're going too fast. It might actually be true that, hey, your body's trying to tell you you're not working in the right zone today. Maybe you just slow it down a little bit and you're going to be able to feel a lot better. So on workout days, the goal isn't to completely destroy yourself and to go a maximum effort all out. The goal is to stress the body just enough so that you're able to have a stress response occur and you're able to recover from that within a couple of days. We're not asking you to all out race these workouts, so we're not testing our fitness during these workouts. So during workout days, yes, you still may have negative thoughts, but if the thoughts are telling you, and they're proving to be correct, that you're going too fast and then you're walking and you're not able to hit the pace, you're slowing down significantly, that could be a pace adjustment thing rather than a mental thing. Next, recovery is super important. So we just talked about the long run and those workouts that you have to do. Those are big stressors on the body. And sometimes we can get so used to being in that discomfort, always pushing ourselves, that it can be really confusing and hard to then switch that off and go into that easy recovery mode. So Jason, you recently mentioned that easy runs used to be very hard for you, and that's probably because you really enjoyed pushing yourself. You enjoyed that grind portion, and so then that recovery portion was maybe a little bit harder for you because it's completely switching gears, focusing on the sleep, nutrition, and going really slow on those easy runs is just as important as those hard workouts. And a lot of times we have to work on our mindset to really embrace that and to be able to be a well-rounded athlete so we can recover from those hard sessions and reap the benefits. Because without that recovery portion, we're not going to make the improvements that we otherwise could have.
Right, and recovery doesn't always just mean rest, right? So we talk about recovery runs and how vital they are. And I think the more you've been running, you can start to handle a little bit more for your recovery in terms of a duration, right? So maybe a lot of your recovery runs started at 2 or 3 miles and now they're up to like 4 or 5 miles. Well, the more you run and the more many years of experience you get, the running can compound itself. And so your recovery runs could be an hour. And I know, like for you example, a lot of times you do go out and run over an hour for just a recovery run. And so that is part of the way to continue to build yourself as a runner and get stronger and to get more fit and to get faster in the long run. So don't underestimate the power of that easy pace or those recovery runs.
Right. It can help build your weekly mileage. And that, again, going back to one of those original points, running more builds your aerobic engine, can make you more efficient, and it's key to success. I mean, there is a reason why elites are running high mileage. It's because the more you run, the bigger your aerobic engine. And of course, you can't just force your way into that. So if you're running 20 miles a week, if you just jumped up to try to run 50, 60, there's repercussions that could come with that, such as injury, burnout, all of those things you have to build slowly. And sometimes there becomes that point of diminishing returns. So me, for example, I have 3 kids who are 7, 4, and 1. So my stress load is a lot higher than when I was, say, 24 years old, no kids. Life was a little bit less stressful. And so the amount of miles that I could run at 24 pre-kids and the amount of miles that I would thrive on right now probably are not going to be the same. And that's okay, right? So we want to know, what is our sweet spot mileage? What is the amount of mileage that we can consistently do, that we can recover from, and that we can see improvements from? So if I forced myself to get out there and run these 80-mile weeks, that could actually be a recipe for burnout and injury, even though I did say the more you run, right, the better your aerobic engine, but it's only to a point. So we don't need to be forcing it, right? We want to do the amount that works for our current situation, our background, all of those things. So that gets into our next point, is avoiding the common pitfalls. A lot of runners can fall victim to some of these traps of overtraining, ignoring recovery, or just racing their workouts. And we want to touch on some of the 3 biggest mistakes that we often see runners make. So number 1 is one that we talk about all the time if you listen to this podcast, and it's actually become more popular in the running community. We hear this a lot. If you're running too fast on your easy days. So easy runs should truly be easy. We want to save our energy for those hard workout days. We want to make sure that we're not stressing our body out so much every single day. So what is an easy run? Well, we could define it by doing a 5K or doing a time trial on our own, seeing where our baseline is at. So right now, let's say I go out and did a 5K and I ran about 6:20 per mile pace. Well, an easy way to calculate this in your head is just the fastest possible time that you want to be running on an easy run is about 2 minutes per mile slower than that 5K time. And even that's a little quick. So for me, a lot of my easy runs are falling in that 3 to 4 minutes per mile slower than my 5K pace currently. And that's what's comfortable for me. And other ways you can calculate this is by looking at your heart rate. One easy way to calculate what's a good heart rate for my easy runs, take the number 180 and subtract your age. That's just a ballpark estimate. That's about the highest you want your heart rate to be on a truly easy run. There's a lot of other ways you can calculate it, right? There's zone 2, all of these things. But just a ballpark way, take that 5K time, add 2 to 4 minutes per mile, or take 180 minus your age. So I'm 33. That would be 147 beats per minute is the highest I would really want my heart rate to be getting during a easy run. And again, it's okay to go even lower. So a lot of my easy runs are in the 120 to 130 range for heart rate.
Yeah, so running every run too fast. I think that's probably the most common one that we see, especially with new athletes that come to us, is just really establishing the proper paces, right? We want to assess the current fitness level, make sure your paces are accurate for where you're at, not necessarily where you want your goals to be at, but where you're at currently.
Right.
The next one is probably skipping strength and mobility. So, it's not just like skipping out on your strength sessions. It's really about not doing the little things that are going to help you feel strong and prepared to run your best. So that could be, just, on a weekly basis, or it could be a daily thing in terms of like warming up properly for a workout, right? Or a race. And I see so many athletes, I've read so many recaps over the years about athletes not getting a chance to warm up before like a 5K race and stuff like that. And I think it's so crucial that we do have a good warm-up routine before you are going to do faster paces. And so by lacking that, not only are you putting your muscles at risk of injury, right? But also I think it's going to affect your performance. And so we want to make sure that everything is activated and firing the way it should so that your muscles can support the load that they're going to be asked to do when you're running fast.
Absolutely. And we've been in the running community for decades now. And I will say that the people who tend to get injured and get sidelined are almost always, like I'd say it's an 80% chance that they do not strength train to the level that they should be, right? So a lot of runners, it's a lot of time to get out there and get your mileage in. Earlier I said running an hour a day for 6 days a week. And people are probably like, where does that time come from, right? It's a part-time job, essentially, if you're really getting after it and you're trying to run these higher mileage weeks, right? And then coming along with that, so you're telling me I have to strength train also. And so these strength training sessions could be another second workout that you're doing 2 days a week or 3 days a week, 1 day a week, whatever it may be. And oftentimes people just don't see the benefit there because I mentioned before that the more that you're running, the stronger your aerobic engine, you're working your aerobic system. When it comes to strength training, there's a lot of things that happen to runners when they go into the gym. Number one, if they've never lifted before, they realize that they are very bad at lifting compared to other people. And so I think there's an ego thing that goes on and that makes them not want to go back. Number two, it's time consuming and it could potentially lead you to be a little bit more sore for your runs. And so again, it's like that ego who is saying, no, skip it. You're not going to be able to hit your paces on your next workout. It's not worth it. There's no benefit. And then third is that running is aerobic, like I mentioned. I said even on my easy runs, my heart rate is, even on the easiest day I go, it's in the 120s, 130s. That's still pretty high, right? We're used to working out in these higher aerobic zones. When you go in the gym and you're lifting, maybe you're following a 5x5 program. And you're saying, Victoria, what's that? So it's essentially, let's say I went in and I wanted to do squats, deadlift, bench press, right? You would do 5 reps, 5 sets of 5 reps at a heavy weight. This might take you 30 plus minutes to get through because it's asking you to rest for 90 seconds to 3 minutes in between. And that is very uncomfortable. I often find I'm like, wait, what? What do I do now? When you are making that shift to learning how to lift heavy, it's so different than running. And that discomfort of doing something that is completely different. This is an anaerobic activity. You're trying to build strength. It's not about sitting there doing 50 bench press reps over and over again. We're trying to do 5 pretty heavy squats back to back. And that's going to maybe be like 30 to 45 seconds. Then we're resting for 3 minutes. And a lot of people, it's just uncomfortable, the difference between going out there grinding for an hour straight versus doing 30 seconds of exercises at a very high intensity and then resting for 3 minutes. People struggle with the disconnect there. And that can cause weaknesses over time. So as you age, your body goes through changes. I know for myself personally, giving birth 3 times, going through all postpartum, there's a lot of body changes that occur, and there's things that need to be rebuilt in terms of strength, like your core, glute weaknesses can occur. There's just, everything is so connected. And if you are neglecting strength, that is not good, because running does not give you the same benefits that strength training does. And sometimes you need to strength train just so that you can run injury free and be able to train. So sometimes you hear the quote, I'm training just to be able to train. That's really why a lot of people prioritize strength training, because they don't want to end up sidelined from running because they neglected these imbalances that were creeping up over time.
Yeah, to go along with strength, I think, is the nutrition piece, right? So this is sort of the third pillar. It's just everything you're putting into your body. So a lot of times, if we're focused our efforts on running, we sometimes neglect, making the best choices in terms of replenishment, right, or fueling properly before runs. And so you really have to have this piece of the puzzle dialed in order to feel good on your runs, in order to make sure you're recovering, right? I've read a lot of comments over the years in Training Peaks about why workouts haven't gone right, and a lot of it boils down to athletes not feeling like they maybe ate, maybe they skipped lunch or whatever it was. They just didn't eat breakfast, or they didn't hydrate enough, that sort of thing. And so this is a very important piece, not just in terms of like everyday what you're eating, but also during the runs. When we talk about like performance for the marathon or the half marathon, it's dialing in that nutrition, right? Getting adequate levels of sodium and carbs so that you don't bonk, those sorts of things.
Right. A lot of people have this dialed in pretty good, but it's also something that can really make or break your runs. And sometimes if you have it dialed in, you almost take it for granted. But a lot of your day almost has to revolve around your training. You have to be thinking, okay, I'm running at this time, so that means I need to fuel by this time. You almost need to calculate things backwards and have everything planned out in advance in order to really hit your potential in the sport, feel good, all of those things. I think sometimes people underestimate how much work all of that is, but if you ever just take a season where you really focus on making sure you're dialed in, it can almost become second nature and really help you in the long run feel good and fuel your body appropriately. So diving into the last segment here, putting everything all together and unlocking your full potential. Everything will click when it all comes together. Your training, your mindset, your recovery, you start to really see big breakthroughs when you combine everything and you stay consistent over the long game. So some of our biggest tips for your best performances in the sport of running is trust the process. So you don't need perfect runs, you just need consistency. This is something I see quite often. I do a lot of our social media for our Run for PR's Instagram, and it seems like a lot of people bounce around from training plan to training plan, or they're always looking for like a quick fix, the next great thing. But that's not necessarily how it works. Sometimes you really just need to commit to one methodology for an extended period of time to see the results. If you try something for 3 weeks and you don't see results, and then you go to something else, you didn't really give it enough time. You have to give something, I would say a minimum of 6 months, to see if you're feeling better, see how your performance is. Sometimes you don't see that performance breakthrough right away. You see it happening in little areas, like maybe you're able to run more, maybe you're not laid up on the couch after all your long runs, maybe there's just little mindset shifts that are happening. But you have to be able to trust the process and lean in and be able to give it your all. If you're always looking for that next quick fix, I just feel like you're never going to be able to reach your potential.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You mentioned earlier the sweet spot and how important that is for, keeping your training consistent, right? And so, yeah, if you're following one of these, like maybe AI generated plans or whatever, a lot of times you might be overtraining and not even knowing it for a while, and then you may not get the results you want. And so it goes back to like having someone to, that's kind of why we do personalized coaching, right? Is we like to have dialogue and make adjustments and understand what works for one person may not work for somebody else. So everything is so individualized. But that goes into trusting the process. It can take months to see results, right? The next one is the learning from our setbacks too. So it's like, how do we overcome an injury or an illness, hit the reset button, and not just lose all that progress we just made. So that goes hand in hand with the consistency piece.
Definitely. With going back to trusting the process really quick before we end that one, a good coach or a good training program, you want to be able to believe in it, right? So if you shouldn't just blindly follow. And I think that's what you were getting at with some of these AI generated plans, or if ChatGPT like wrote me up a plan, I would have to believe in it before things would work, right? If I just blindly follow it and I'm doubting it the whole time, your mind, that placebo effect, you're not going to be able to lean in and fully trust. And that's why I think a good coach, a real person, right, is able to tell you, hey, this is why we're doing things. So if you ever are having that doubt, have that conversation with your coach. Reach out to someone. Hey, why is a plan like this? Maybe you don't even have a coach right now, but you're using like a Hal Higdon plan. Ask an online running coach, hey, do you know why this plan is developed like this? And a good coach will probably be able to give you their hypothesis as to why the plan is structured like that, tell you if it could work for you or not, and then give you more information about your background and what sort of processes they would recommend for you. And that's how you really know if you're working with someone who is a good coach, is they can help you fall into trusting the process. I mean, same goes for any service type person that you're hiring, right? If you went to go talk to a lawyer, you would want to trust that they know what they're doing and that they have experience and that they can reassure you, yes, this is the process we have to go through. And you don't necessarily fully understand every time you're working with a professional like that, but you can understand that they are guiding you in the direction that they've helped other people down, and you can see the success that they've had with their other clients and really lean into that. And then as you trust the process and as you trust the professional, you're able to then see the trusting yourself, right? So sometimes you have to lean on someone else's belief first before you kind of see it for yourself. And then learning from your setbacks, like you mentioned, sometimes we do have those difficult races where things don't go our way for whatever reason. Maybe there's weather, maybe you were getting sick, maybe the training cycle just wasn't what you hoped it would be. Maybe there's a lot of other factors. And so every time something doesn't go your way, instead of sulking in it, it's okay to be upset. Obviously, you put a lot of time and energy into that training. And so, of course, you're going to be upset. But what can we learn from that experience? What can we learn from it? It doesn't have to be this, oh, woe is me, I'm the victim. We can say, hey, let's try to figure out what went wrong here, and let's try to learn something to avoid it from happening again in the future. And there's a lot of things that you can learn when you have that learning approach and that curious mind instead of just kind of shutting it down and not really wanting to dig deeper. Then next, you want to find your why. When the miles get tough, remember why you're doing it, what keeps you moving forward. And sometimes this can be challenging because it doesn't really have to be this like, wow, I'm doing this because some amazing reason. It can be something that's almost silly, right? You just have to have something that gets you through it to be able to finish. And so maybe your why is so that you can post it on Strava, so that you can show up to the office on Monday and tell your coworkers that you finished the marathon instead of walk off the course. I don't know what your why is. Maybe your why is a little bit more profound than that. Maybe it isn't, but I find that when I hear people say, know your why, sometimes they don't have to be something that's so profound. It can be something minor. And if that's the thing that gets you to cross the finish line, hold on to that, because that's actually highly motivating. If your motivation is to show up to work on Monday and to be able to tell your coworkers you finished the race, that's actually very applicable, and it could be the thing that does help you. Whereas other people say their why is, well, I could say so many things, right? More profound things than that. Whatever it is for you and whatever you can lean on and grab on, that's what you should really do, because your why should help you finish when the going gets tough.
Right, and it doesn't always have to be the same, right? My why has changed so many times over the years based on seasons of life or like goals that I want to accomplish, or maybe I'm trying something new. So, it doesn't need to be like time oriented or anything like that. It could just be, I don't know, something that is motivating you. And I think in the back of our minds, we have long-term goals we want to achieve, right? A lot of us. And so figuring out what are little benchmarks along the way that could help you just sort of focus on the immediate future instead of like, the 5-year goal of trying to run a Boston qualifying time, that sort of thing. If you're, 30 or 45 minutes away from that, it's like, what can we do now? And maybe it's just pushing yourself in a new way. We gave some good tips early in the podcast, challenging yourself, maybe doing more speed, that sort of thing.
Yeah, a lot of really good points there. Your why can change from day to day, race to race. And I like how you talked about connecting the big picture, right? So I think there have been a few times where I've had really challenging races. And one of the things that kept me going was the fact that I have long-term goals and I know that in the future I'm going to have difficult races. And so I could use this race as an opportunity to really just let the ego go, finish it out, and lean on this difficult experiences during future races and use it as almost a tool in my toolkit to finish when things get difficult. And that is a race sometimes I look back on and think, remember that one race you almost dropped out of? Well, do you feel as bad as you do now then? And usually the answer is no. And I'll say, if you finish that day, you can finish today. And so sometimes your why can be something like that. And I like how you connected all of that, is you have to always be thinking about the long term and the big picture when it comes to your running, because it's not about the short term. We want to be patient and we want to think about the long-term success, because with distance running, the longer you stay in the game, the more your success is going to compound over time, and you're going to see those really big breakthroughs. That's why we oftentimes see people hit lifetime PRs in their 40s, even though they've been running since they were teenagers. So that's over 20 years of progress, 25 years of seeing improvements. So you really want to be in it for the long haul. So success in long distance running isn't just about talent. It's about commitment, smart training, and believing in yourself. Now, I want to hear from you. What's your next big goal? Send me a message on social media at Run4PRs on Instagram. And if you're looking for expert coaching and structured training, grab our free training plans on our website, www.run4prs.com. Thanks for tuning in to the Run4PRs podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Keep pushing towards your full potential. Until next time, keep running strong.